So I'm here with Scott Rosenberg, the author of Say Everything, The History of Blogging. What's the tagline again?
How blogging began, what it's becoming,
right.
and why it matters.
Right. You said it, so I didn't have to memorize it. Okay, well, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thanks.
So let's talk about your book. Tell me a little bit about why you wrote it, what you're hoping to accomplish, kind of the inspiration for it.
I was one of the first columnists to write about blogging. I wrote a column about blogging in 1999 before we even called it blogging. It was called weblogs at that time. And I kind of experienced this whole story over the course of a decade of this form that kind of came out of nowhere. And at some point over the last couple of years, as new forms of social media emerged and became even more popular than blogging, I realized that this story was not actually that well known. That even, you know, when you live through something, you take for granted that people know the story, and then maybe as you get a little older, and you realize, oh, not everybody has any idea where this stuff came from. One of the early bloggers, Heather Armstrong of Deuce.com, she's now a very popular mommy blogger. She blogs about her family and her kids and is very successful. But long before that, she was fired from her job in a web development company in 2001 or 2002 because she wrote some really snarky things about her coworkers. And it actually became a verb. It was if you got deuced, it meant that you were fired because of something you wrote on your blog. And here's a story. This was happening, long before anyone ever had a problem on Facebook or Twitter, or with saying something that was inappropriate for their professional sphere. All of these kinds of questions about how do I know whether somebody's real or not? Things that, is this a real account or fake? Is Twitter, we have these questions, you see a celebrity's name, you think, who is that, really the person or not? All of these experiences were kind of, the bloggers were there first, and the stories are fascinating, and there's a lot that we can actually learn from, I think, and maybe, in the technology industry in particular, there's kind of historical amnesia. People really are so focused on the next thing that they forget that there are cycles of history that we can learn from. And I thought, well, let's capture these stories, let's put them down, let's tell them in what I hope is an entertaining and interesting way, so that maybe we can learn from them.
Yeah, so just going back a few years, when you mentioned that you've been sort of blogging since the late '90s, right? Was there kind of an aha moment for you where you suddenly realized, like, wow, this is a platform that could really go somewhere? I mean, was there a moment for you where you sort of embraced it because you realized its power, or was it kind of a more gradual thing?
For me, I think as a journalist, I was really slow, so I felt like, well, I already had a place to write. I had a website at Salon that was publishing my stuff to the web. What was the big deal about, so it's reverse chronological order, or people can post comments. Well, what's the big deal? And I feel like I was, I admired the fact that the doors were opening wider and more people had a chance to express themselves, so I responded to that. But for me and for my colleagues, professionals, I thought, we probably don't need that. And it took me a long time to get that. And I think journalists have had a harder time because we almost have to unlearn. A lot of blogging is really about just pursuing your obsessions and letting your passion about what you're writing about come through. That's what makes a great blog. And a lot of professional journalism is really about screening out a lot of your personal enthusiasm for things, and really trying to be fair, trying to be balanced, trying to present all sides of an issue. And so I think in some ways journalists have actually been at a disadvantage in catching on to the power of blogs. They have, I think, in many and now perhaps most cases, gotten over that, but it took a long time.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I know I've training as a journalist as well, which we've talked about. But it's almost like a blog is better when you leave it a little kind of fuzzy around the edges, when everything isn't quite finished. When there's room for discussion, and maybe you don't bring up every side of an issue, or you leave that for people to discuss.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And also mixing up. So this is where it gets complicated. I talked about there's a value in keeping your personal and professional life distinct, because you can get into trouble if you are too, if you mix them up too broadly. On the other hand, a lot of blogs gain their power from people's willingness to mix it up, to not say this is a blog that is only about this one narrow niche, but maybe I'll, once in a blue moon, I'll mention something else that's going on in my life. I mean, you'll get different advice about this. Certainly in the in the marketing world, the advice to keep your blog focused is good advice. Mm-hmm. But the power of blogs is also in their ability to present you as a person and you as a human being, and that's not so cut and dried. And
yeah, and so that's actually an issue that a lot of marketers and a lot of companies, I think, really struggle with. How much of the sort of human element is it okay to bring in? What's your advice for companies like that? How does a company straddle the line between that sort of personal versus professional?
It's complicated and tough, because to some extent you're going to be relying on the judgment of employees, and if you give them, I think, clear guidance, some kind of set of guidelines that they can, and some examples from some people who you have somebody in your company who is sort of trustworthy. So I was the first blogger at Salon. I was the managing editor. So in journalism, the issue was, how can you have someone post stuff that isn't going to be seen by an editor? Right. And well, I was an editor, so the people at the company could accept that, well, it's okay to have someone not be edited because he's already an editor. So if you start with someone who you already trust, and you give them some extra leeway, and you tell them, you can be more of a fully rounded human being here. This is not, you're not just speaking in the company's voice. You can be a little more personal, because the personal is what's effective in this medium.
Right.
And it's going to be a first person. Blogs are a first person medium. If you try to speak in a corporate or collective voice, it's going to be very hard to make it sound real.
Right. So in other words, be personal, but don't be intimate, or don't cross the boundary into something that place you don't want to go. All right. So in your book, Say Everything. I mean, you're talking, a lot of what you're talking about is that what did you say this, that in X number of years that everybody will be a publisher, everybody will have a blog. I mean, right now everybody essentially could have a blog or be a publisher or have a voice if they choose to have one. So the challenge for marketers in a situation like that is, how do you get any attention from anybody if everybody's talking? If everybody can say everything, then who's listening, and how do you get people's attention? People
were always talking about your products. Now you have the opportunity to listen in, which you never had, unless you were, the CIA tapping people's telephones or something. You never had that chance to hear it. Now you do. So my advice would be to say, don't think of it as the problem of being, how am I heard? Think of the problem as being, how do I listen? And once I can listen, I can zero in on those people who are already talking about my product or my field, whatever it is that my message is about, and then I can engage with them. And I already know that they're pre-selected. They're going to have some awareness of what I'm talking about, and I hope some interest. And then if I can provide them something of value, if I'm not just going to them saying, buy my product, but I'm saying, oh, you mentioned that you have this problem. Right. Just wanted to make sure you knew that we have a product that we think might solve that problem. Oh, and we'll give you this support for it. And if you have any questions, here's how you reach me. It's a chance, think of it as a chance to listen rather than a problem of how am I going to be heard. Right. So in other words, listening to those voices is important as adding to the conversation. Exactly. Right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks so much. Okay.